The wrong name on the card. KeanuReeves had never planned to attend a funeral that day. In fact, his schedule had been quiet, just a short visit to a bookshop downtown. Maybe coffee afterward. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, but sometimes life doesn't follow your plans and mediums. It bends quietly into something else. And if you're paying attention, you know Tichy was walking past a small church on Pine Street when he saw the signboard out front. It simply read "Farewell, Daniel Anderson's name caught his attention. His eyes narrowed. It sounded familiar. Keanu pulled a folded card from his coat pocket. It had arrived in his mailbox just 2 days ago. Return address. A small white envelope. Inside was a printed card in loving memory of Daniel Anderson. Service to be held on Tuesday, Pine Street, Chapel. Date and time matched exact like Keanu had thought. It was from someone connected to his childhood. Maybe an old friend from the past. Hadn't remembered the name clearly, but it had stirred something in him. So now here he was, standing outside a quiet church, drawn in by a name, be a feeling, and a little mystery. Stepped inside. The chapel was small but beautiful. Stained glass windows filtered in warm-colored light. A few rows of wooden benches lined the room, and near the front sat a modest casket draped in white lilies. A handful of people were present, older, quiet faces marked with grief. And Keanu moved to the last row and sat down. It kept his head low, not wanting to draw attention. He thought maybe once the service started he would recognize someone a bit. As the minutes passed, it realized he did. Not one fast, not one voice. And when the eulogy began and the speaker talked about Daniel Anderson, retired watchmaker who lived his last years in a nursing home, Keanu's stomach sank. This wasn't the Daniel Anderson he had in mind, not someone from his past, not someone he ever knew. Had made a mistake. The card was not for him, but something stopped him from leaving. It was a photo placed at the front of the chapel, a black and white image of an old man with kind eyes full of story. Ash looked peaceful, gently. Maybe Keanu stayed through the soft hymns, through the tears of a woman who spoke about how Daniel fixed her father's pocket watch for free, through the silence when no family stood to speak. Keanu stayed, and when the service ended and people began to leave, quiet lie stood alone near the casket. Whispered he didn't know Yaubit. I'm here. Simeon should be here. As he turned to Levy, a frail woman in a gray sweater approached him, her eyes soft and watery. Thank you for coming, she said. He smiled. Politelli, think I made a mistake. He thought I knew him. I'm sorry. The woman tilted her head. No mistake, we're meant to be here. Keanu looked at her confused. Continued. Daniel always said if no one came to say goodbye, hoped a stranger would. Simeon Simeon quiet, so man who'd sit in the back and just be there. He didn't want to leave alone. Keanu felt something shift in his chest. The Askid, you knew him well. Schnadedi worked at the home where he lived his final years. Didn't have much, no family, no visitors, just a shelf of old clocks and a notebook full of dreams. Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out the invitation card again. Was sent. Thisash looked at it, then smiled gently. Didi mailed a few out to people he mentioned once in his journal. Names he said he liked the sound, often at real friends, just people he remembered from a film or a book. He found your name. He mentioned you once after watching one of your movies. Said you look like someone who would sit quietly at a stranger's funeral. Keanu stared at her, his voice barely above a whisper. Really, wrote. Thatch nodded again. Believed in fating gentle accident, believed kindness would find him one last time. And it did. Tears welled up in Keanu's eyes. Said softly, thank you for inviting. Meth woman placed her hand on his arm. Thank you for showing up. As he walked out of the chapel, the sun had shifted behind clouds. World felt quieter, but in his chest something was glowing. Had come by mistake, but maybe there are no mistakes. Not when your heart listens. Didn't know it then, but that one funeral, that one stranger was about to change everything, because Daniel Anderson's story wasn't over. It was only beginning, and Keanu was now a part of it. Asterisk, the Journal of Dreams. KeanuReeves couldn't stop thinking about Daniel Anderson's man whose funeral he had attended by mistake, or maybe not by mistake. He wasn't sure anymore. Something about it lingered in him, like a soft echo. The image of the quiet Chapelthy photo of the old man with kind eyes, and the words of the nurse he mentioned. You once said you looked like someone who would sit quietly at a stranger's funeral. Those words didn't feel like coincidence. They felt like something else, a thread pulling him toward something he couldn't yet see. The next day, Keanu returned to the nursing home, saying when the nurse had mentioned Ed didn't know what he was looking for. Mabe closure. Mabe just to say thank you, Albert. As he walked through the quiet halls of the home-past rooms with soft murmurs and television sounds, felt a strange kind of peace. The receptionist smiled as he entered. "You must be Keenaners," Claire said. "You might come back. Sh left something for you." Keanu raised an eyebrow. For Mesh nodded and handed him a small brown box. It had a simple label written in blue ink. Daniel's journal. Keanu sat in a chair by the window and opened it slowly. Inside was a worn notebook, a few photographs, and a folded letter addressed simply to the kind stranger. Open the letter first. It read, "Dear stranger, if you're reading this, I did what I always hoped someone would do. You came to say goodbye, even if by accident you were meant to be there. I believe that me name is Daniel Andersoni. Lived a quiet life. I fixed watches and clocks for over 40 years. He never married. He had friends once, but most of them passed long before Meadowward. The end. I started to feel invisible, but then I decided I wouldn't let my story end in silence. I started writing dreams, not the kind you have at night, but the kind you hold in your heart. Things I wanted to do, people I wanted to meet, places I wanted to see, and I left this behind for you because maybe, just maybe, you'll finish what I started." Daniel sat in silence for a long time after reading it, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the pages of the journal. Each one was dated. Each one described a dream, not big flashy things, just quiet. "We Shessie want to visit the ocean one more time. I want to see someone laugh at one of my old jokes again. I want to give away a watch to a kid who can't afford one. I want someone to read my journal and maybe feel less alone. Page after page, dream after dream, some with little drawings, some with photos tucked between." Keanu flipped to the last page and it was blank except for one small line in the middle. "Over you, I believe in you." Keanu closed the journal gently and looked out the window. Didn't know this man, but now he felt like he did. Thought about all the things Daniel had written, and he made a quiet promise he'll finish them, not all in one day, not all at once, but I'll finish them for you, for me, for everyone who ever felt forgotten. Started that same week. He visited a beach along the coast and took Daniel's photo with him. He sat by the shore, watched the waves, and whispered, "You're here." No, went to a local school and donated 3 watches in the name of Daniel Anderson. Told the story to the kids, and of them asked, "Was he your dad?" Keanu smiled, "No, but maybe we were meant to know each other." Anyway, found old recordings from Daniel's neighborhood, a small open mic night where Daniel once tried stand-up comedy. Played the recording and laughed at even when the jokes were bad. Laughed because someone once tried to bring joy into the world, and that Moderadoni by one dreams were being lived. Sure had complained, and the more he did, the more he felt alive. One evening, Keanu returned to the nursing home to see Nurse Claresh welcomed him with a warm smiley. "I've become something of a legend around her." Other kids from the school sent letters. The beach staff said someone left a flower by the water with a note that simply read, "For Danielle. Was never famous, but no was being remembered." Keanu nodded. "He gave me something I didn't know I needed." Claire said, "Mabe, you gave each other that." They walked through the halls together, passing by elderly faces and quiet conversation. Claire stopped by a door, cleared out Daniel's room, but there's one thing still. Haresh opened the door slowly. On the nightstand sat an old pocket watch, gold smelt hands still ticking underneath. It was a photo. Keanu holding Daniel's journal at the beach. Simeon must have printed it from the school's website. Claire, Sadie, think he'd want you to have it." Keanu picked up the watch, felt its weight, listened to the ticking. It was steady, soft, religious, like Danielle. Put it in his coat pocket and left the room. Outside, the sky was turning orange, the sun dipping low. Didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this. Some stories begin with a mistake, but fate doesn't make mistakes. It simply waits for us to notice and to know. Keanu was ready to see what came next. The girl with the broken watch. 12 weeks had passed since Keanu Reeves finished reading Daniel Anderson's journal. Each dream fulfilled had brought something unexpected, not just closure, but a deeper connection to people, places, and moments. Keanu didn't talk about it on camera. He didn't post it on social media. This was quiet, private. Something for the Sioux. Thought maybe the journey was complete a bit. Fate was still writing, and she had more pages to turn. It was a cold afternoon when Keanu walked into a small repair shop tucked between 2 tall buildings on a quiet street. He had found it listed in the back of Daniel's notebook under the heading "Gold Shop, where I learned everything." He stepped inside, and the scent of oil, wood, and dust greeted him. A bell above the door jingled softly. An old man with silver hair and a magnifying glass perched on his nose looked up from behind the counter. His name tag read Leo. You look like a man with a purpose, he said with a kind smile. Keanu held out the pocket. Watch, it's ticking, but I'd like to know more about it. Leo took it gently from his hands and examined it carefully. His expression shifted from casual to surprise at this. Is one of Danielle's. Keanu nodded. You knew him? Leo smiled sadly. Was my apprentice. Ans had the steadiest hands I've ever seen. Never rushed anything. This watch was one of his best. Keanu sat down across from him. He met him. He actually met him after he was gone. Leo nodded slowly. Some people show up at just the right time. Then, if it's the end of the road. Keanu asked, did he ever mention a girl? Samin, he left something behind for Leo. Tapped the side of the watch and said no, but there was a story. Daniel once told me he helped a young girl who came in crying. Her watch was broken. A gift from her mother fixed it for free. Said she reminded him of someone he lost long ago. She came back once to say thank you, but he never saw her again. Keanu felt a spark, a quiet push. Though, you know her name? Leo closed his eyes for a moment. Immediately think she was about 12, long hair. Candice, that's all I remember. Keanu left the shop with the watch still ticking in his pocket and a name now echoing in his mind. Emilie didn't know why it mattered, but something told him this was the next chapter. He visited Claire at the nursing home the next morning. She remembered the story. Neil used to talk about her sometimes when the power went out and they lit candles. Shed sigh. Hope Emily's okay. Hope she still wears that watch. Keanu asked if she knew how to find her. Claire said no, but maybe the watch. Dosh gave Keanu Daniel's remaining things in a small box. He found a receipt, a handwritten note from years ago, and a thank you card signed lovingly Grace. Keanu searched online. It took a few days, but finally he found here a volunteer worker at a local community center. Age 24, still in the same city. I drove there one rainy afternoon. Center was full of noise and life, kids playing, people talking, and in the corner near the coat rack stood a young woman helping a child with homework. She had long hair tied back in a calm voice. Keanu approached slowly. Excuse me. Turned Yisim looking for Emily. Grisesh nodded politely. If it's me. Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out the old pocket watch. Her eyes widened instantly. That's Minna. Her voice cracked. Stepped back slightly. Where did you get? Faith said softly. It belonged to Daniel Anderson. Passed away recently and he wanted someone to finish his dream. She took the watch in her hands. Tears filled her eyes. He thought I lost this forever. Fixed it when I was little. Me mom gave it to me right before she died, and then it broke. Hey, thought nothing could fix it, but he did. She looked at Keanu. How did you know to find me? Keanu shrugged. He didn't. Led meanly sat down slowly holding the watch. Classy was the first adult who showed me kindness when I needed it. Mosti told myself I'd grow up and help others the way he helped me. Keanu looked around the community center. You did. Emily laughed softly through her tears. Guess I did. Sat beside her and told her everything about the funeral, the journal, the dreams, the kids, the beach, and the laughter. Be the end. They both sat in silence. No need for more words, just presence. Later that evening, as the rain poured gently outside, Keanu Esquedo, you think Daniel knew how much he meant to ya? Only not that he think he knew, and now he knows even more. Keanu reached into the box and handed her the journal. She opened it carefully, reading each line, and when she reached the last page, pulled out a pen and wrote, "I kept the promise I remember." Eddie gave back. Keanu watched her and felt something deep, quiet. Kumplif. He left him. Ellie said, "Can I ask you something, Rui? Did you go to his funeral? You didn't know him?" Keanu smiled. The card showed up in my mailbox. Wrong name, wrong person, but maybe, just maybe right. Heartily looked down at the watch and whispered, "No mistake. We're always meant to find Hyman. Maybe I was always meant to find you." Keanu didn't know what came next, but he knew this wasn't the end. Not for Danielle, not for Emilian, not for him. Asterisk the letter under the floorboard. KeanuReeves had found peace in the moments that follow, with quiet ones not captured on screen or remembered by crowds. Had met Emily. Grace fulfilled Daniel's dreams and passed the journal into the hands of someone it truly belonged to, but fate was not finished yet. An afternoon, Keanu returned to the nursing home to visit Clara. They sat in the garden sipping tea under a tree full of late summer leaves. Handed him an old envelope. This came from Daniel's storage unit. New manager was cleaning out unclaimed boxes and found one with your name on it. Keanu took the envelope carefully. It was sealed with wax. In the back was a name, Elias, and her sonat Daniel Samin. Elsign side was a single page of handwritten words and a yellowed photo note read, "If someone ever comes looking, if someone remembers my brother, they deserve to know everything." Keanu looked at the photo. Two young boys standing in front of a small wooden house. Had Daniel's kind eyes. The other had sharper features, and a playful grin. Flipped the photo over. Written on the back, Daniel and Elias 1905 to Green Rock. Keanu turned to Claire. Edited. Daniel ever mention a brother? Shook her head. Not to maybe it. He had secrets the kind buried too deep for conversation. Kean couldn't ignore it's a me thing in that photo. Called to him a chapter of Daniel's story still unwritten. Packed a bag and drove to Green Rock, a small forgotten town for hours away. The roads narrowed, trees thickened. Time seemed to slow when he arrived. He found the town almost empty. A single Denera gas station and a library with broken blinds showed the photo to the woman at the diner counter. Studied it and said that's the Anderson house up by the hill husband lived in for decades. Keanu followed the winding dirt road to a quiet clearing there. It stood, the old wooden house, peeling paint, a crooked porch bit still standing. He stepped inside it. Filled the air. Light filtered through broken slats. Everything was silent. Walked from room to room, most of it empty, but in the back found a small study, books still on the shelf, a desk with rusted hinges and a wooden floor that creaked under every step. Keanu stood still in the middle of the room. His instinct sharpened. Something was off. Knelt down and tapped the floorboards and echoed hollow. Pried it open slowly, and beneath it, trapped in a faded cloth, was a box. Inside was a stack of letters, dozens of them all addressed to Daniel, each signed with the same name. Keanu. Read the first one. Dear Daniele, don't know if you'll ever read this. He don't even know where you are, but I think of you every day. Was wrong. He left angry and I never came back, and now he don't know how to say sorry, so I write Mabe. One day you'll find Thesean. No, he never stopped being your brother. Keanu sat for hours reading letter after letter. A story unfolded. Two brothers who had a falling out in their 20s over a broken watch, an argument that turned into silence. Elias had written every year birthday, shrivism, random Tuesdays, always the same hope that Daniel would return, but he never did. Keanu looked at the last letter. It was written just 2 months before Daniel's death. Elias wrote, I heard about you through someone at the Watchmakers Guild. He said you still work with your hands, still make the gears turn. He wish I could turn time, but maybe someone else will. Samine, who reads this and understands that some mess things we leave unsaid are heavier than any silence. Keanu closed the box and whispered, you both deserved better. Returned to the nursing home with the box. Claire read a few pages and wiped away tears. Never told Inyana. Keanu said he don't think he knew these existed. They were under the floor, hidden. Mabe by Elias. Mabe by time. Claire asked, what will you do with them? Keanu thought for a long moment and said him going to find out what happened to Elias. If he's still alive, he needs to know. Drove back to the sit. Used the name, searched through directory, sold newspapers. Finally he found something, an obituary. Elias Anderson passed away 5 years ago in a town called Riverview. No children, no wife, but survived by one neighbor. Miss Adelaide White found her number. Called an elderly voice. Answered. Aziz knew Elias was kinqueet. Never spoke of familiar until the end. Mentioned a brother once, but said it was too late. Keanu visited her the next day. He brought the box, held it in her hands, and whispered, would have wanted this. They both would have it. Before Keanu left, she handed him something, a small music box used to play this when he wrote letters. Smabe, it belongs to both of them. No. Keanu took it. Jenna listened to the tune and thought about two brotherson with hands that fixed time, and one who wrote through silence. A chapter closed. A circle completed. Returned to Emily the next evening, shared everything. She placed the letters next to the journal and whispered, no, the story is whole. Keanu didn't speak, just smiled, and for the first time felt like Daniel could finally rest. The bench by the triotum had rivet leaves painted the sidewalks in red and gold. There was crisp and the city moved just a little slower. Keanu Reeves sat quietly on a wooden bench in the park near the community center. The same bench Daniel once mentioned in his journal. He used to sit there every Sunday after visiting the library, watching families play. Couples walk by, called at his window into the world. Keanu came now to think to remember to just breathe. Beside him sat Emily Graciev, girl with the broken watch. No restored, no glowing. She held Daniel's journal gently in her lap. We've done so much, she said softly, but I feel like something's still missing. Keanu nodded. He've been feeling that too. Reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small music box given to him by Elias's neighbor. Turned the key. Lithe, soft tune floated through the park. The melody was simple but full of longing. Daniel and Elias had both listened to this sound while waiting. The other While writing and now it played for the memory Sadie wonder how many people pass through life and never realize how much they meant to someone else. Keanu replied quietly, maybe more than we'll ever know, but sometimes fate brings a few of them back. Together Evan through strangers opened the journal and flipped to one of the earliest pages. There was a line Daniel had written, want to leave something behind. That matter seemingly whispered. Did they sat in silence for a while, then Emily spoke. Again, do you think it's Tim? Keanu turned to her. Time for what I'm to share his story with the world. Keanu didn't answer right away, but the idea had been growing in his heart too, not as a film, not as fame, but something honest, something real, a book, a documentary, maybe a voice to carry Daniel's dreams further than just the pages of his journal, something that might help others who feel forgotten. Keanu finally said yes, it's time. They visited Claire at the nursing home later that day. She smiled when they told her the plane, would have blushed so hard knowing people cared this much. Thought he'd leave quietly or making sure he doesn't. Keanu spent the next weeks gathering everything, photocopying the letter, scanning the journal, interviewing the kids who got Daniel's watches, visiting the beach again. Each place they had gone, each moment they had honored, collected them like stars in a night sky. Millie wrote 2 chapters about her own life. Her mother lost the gift of kindness from a stranger in a repair shop. They worked in a small rented room with yellow walls and a crooked lamp. No deadliness, no pressure, just truth. When the final page was written, Keanu sat in silence for a long time. Read the last paragraph out loud. This story started with a funeral that wasn't me, a name I didn't recognize, a mistake that wasn't a mistake, but through it I found connection, helling a man who believed in dreams even when no one else was watching. This isn't just Daniel's story, it's all of her. She looked at Emily, Riadish nodded. The book was titled Stranger Who Stayed in. They dedicated it simply for the quiet ones who leave loud echoes within months. The book reached thousands. Letters poured in from people who felt forgotten, people who remembered someone they lost, people who never got the chance to say goodbye. One message stood out. It came from a boy named Aaron. Wrote, read about Daniel and I want to fix watches like him. Can you teach me? Keanu smiled when he read it and called Emily Lays teach him. They invited Aaron to the community center. Was 12, curious and full of questions. Keanu showed him how to open the back of a watch, how to listen, how to wait. Boy, a sked. Was Daniel really alone? Keanu answered, not anymore. News outlets picked up the story, not because of the fame, but because of the kindness. People began donating watches to be repaired and given to kids. They called it time for dreams, and at the heart of it was one man who believed someone would come. Keanu sat on the bench again, one evening alone. This time the journal in his hand. Turned to the last page and wrote, kept your promises, found your brothery, past your dreams, you were never forgotten. As he closed the journal, a soft breeze passed through the park. A single golden leaf landed on his shoulder. Looked up, and for a moment they felt Daniel sitting beside him, not in body but in spirit. Quiet contenters asterisk. The timekeeper's legacy community center was filled with quiet, energetic kids laughing in the background, volunteers sorting donations, and in the far room, under a flickering ceiling light, Keanu Reeves sat at a table with a boy named Aaron. A watch lay open between them, tiny gears shining under the desk lamp. Ron leaned in with steady hands and focused eyes. Keanu smiled, you were doing great, just breathe. Listen to the click, every gear has a reason, every second matters. Aaron looked up and said, it feels like I'm building something bigger than just a watch. Keanu nodded, you were carrying a story, a dream. Pointed to a photo on the wall. It showed Daniel Anderson in black and white smiling beside a wooden workbench. Photo now hung in what they had named the timekeeper's room, a small part of the center where kids could learn not just to fix watches but to find patience. Purposed quiet, joyfully. Grace entered the room with a tray of tea and cookies, placed them down and whispered, you to look like you've been building a rocket. Keanu laughed. Almash sat beside them and handed Keanu a folded letter. This came in today from a woman in Montreal. He opened it and read aloud, here Keanu and Amelie lost my father last year. Was quiet, gently a watchmaker too. He thought no one remembered people like him anymore. Until I found your book. Thank you for reminding the world that small lives matter too. Sincerely, Mary. Keanu folded the letter carefully and placed it in the memory box, a wooden box now filled with stories from strangers around the world, people who were touched by Daniel's legacy, stories of kindness, forgiveness, the quiet power of being present. A few days later they held a small event at the center. The Called it time. Remember Redfamly's Kama children showed off watches. They had cleaned volunteers read passages from the bookler. Came tooled her now, but still sharp sat in the front row tears. In her eyes when Keanu took the Stagia held up Daniel's pocket watch. This was the beginning of everything he said he didn't know Daniel, and her not until he was gone. But now he feel like I've known him all my life. His story was quiet but not small, taught me that sometimes a stranger can change your life. In some of the mess you can change. There's two very one. Clapped not loud, not wild, but warm. Millie stepped forward next and shared a final letter own Daniel had written in the back of the journal, hidden inside a fold shred of. Someone finds this and finishes my dream. See, hope they find their own along the way. Don't rush, don't fear, just be gentle with the time you have after the event. As the crowd slowly left, Keanu walked back to the park bench. By the tree, Emily sat beside him. The journal between them, it had new pages now added by those they met, including one from Aaron. Thank you, Daniele, wanna be like you. Keanu whispered, "I'd be proud." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. "We'll all carry someone that wise," Keanu said. And Sametamasomine carries used night. The stars came out early, clear, critical time itself was watching. And smiling, Keanu stood up, lest the pocket watch in the center of the bench, and said, "We don't need to hold it anymore. It's here, it always will be's." They walked away. The watch ticked soft, lest he drew like a heart that had waked and finally been heard.